I refuse to believe that anybody founded the school with the idea of making it discriminatory or segregational.
According to the authors of a comprehensive new study on this area, the task of building viable communities is proving far more troublesome. In Dublin 15, massive new estates have joined old established suburbs such as Blanchardstown and Castleknock. The population has exploded, in recent years up by 27%. That's 3 times the national growth rate. But it's not just the population boom that's causing difficulties, its ethnic makeup is equally dramatic. Census figures show no less than a quarter of Dublin 15's population is ethnic minority. In some areas, the ratio's half and half. In the schools where pressure for places is intense, immigrant communities are really losing out. This report warns against segregation, but in one part of Dublin 15, Diswellstown, that's already happened. And that can't happen fast enough, according to this study. It's found evidence of what it calls white flight in Dublin 15. It warns against a downward spiral of ghettoisation. Of children leaving schools mid-cycle in recent years, almost half were Indigenous Irish, half ethnic minority. But the children who replaced them were mostly the children of immigrants, just 21% the children of Irish parents. But this morning, the author of this study warned that without proper planning, more schools could mean more segregation, more situations like Diswellstown.
We as black people, it's time. It's time for us to come together. It's time for us to rebuild a New Orleans, the one that should be a chocolate New Orleans. This city will be chocolate at the end of the day.
But while forced segregation is illegal, a voluntary version is all the more common more than a half-century later.
In recent years, that has changed. Public schools in the South and North have gone back to being mostly black and Latino or mostly white and legally.
More than 2,000 students go to West Charlotte High School. 19 of them are white. Almost all the others are black.
The last time there was a white student in your class was when?
The 3rd grade.
You're 11th grade now, and you haven't been in a classroom with a white student since 3rd grade?
3rd grade.
It wasn't always this way. For nearly 30 years, starting in the early 1970s, West Charlotte was integrated, about 60% white, about 40% African American.
We have schools that are 99 to 100% black or Latino.
Conversation.
Critics say there's nothing inherently wrong or harmful about schools being racially imbalanced, as long as it's not the result of deliberate segregation.
I don't see anything sinister about the fact that some schools are going to be predominantly one race and other schools are going to be predominantly a different race.
West Charlotte High is now almost back to where it was when it was one of Charlotte's 2 racially segregated Negro high schools. There are many schools just like West Charlotte.
After the attacks of 9/11, there was a big push to integrate the nearly 2 million Muslims into British society. Easier said than done. A recent survey of Muslims shows that just 44% of 18 to 24-year-olds feel Britain is their country. 30% would rather live under Sharia law than democracy. 28% would like to see Great Britain become an Islamic state. And an overwhelming majority, 81%, consider themselves Muslim first and British second. Muhammad Uddin, like so many other Muslim immigrants, moved into so-called parallel communities where there's little hint of mainstream British culture.
So they move into an area where there are lots of Muslims and lots of South Asians.
Areas like East London, which has the highest Muslim population in the country.
I feel very safe here as a Muslim. We can practice our faith with no distractions.
Spend a few minutes on the streets of East London and you'd think you are in some Middle East capital. There's nothing here that you can't buy, mostly products Muslims want. There's no doubt that Islam has a profound impact on British culture and society. Take, for example, the bank across the street. It offers Sharia checking accounts, and increasingly Muslims are flocking to such banks. Parallel communities like the one here in East London are emerging all across Europe. And in fact, some Muslims like to claim these areas are off limits to non-Muslims. Case in point, when Britain's Home Secretary John Reid visited East London in September, Abu Izzadin, a radical Islamic leader, shouted at Reed saying,
Secondly, it is absolutely necessary to convince all member countries and regions and local communities to do more and to stop segregation. We still have, for example, segregation in several schools.
People believe that, oh, we all get on in this friendly world, we're all equal and happy together. But no, they need to wake up and realise that racism is everywhere. You can't stop it, and until you take them away from each other, you're never going to stop racism. As long as we're together, there's always going to be racism and conflict. It's not until you send them back to their country or segregate them.
Is this on? Yes. Very well. I am not much of a public speaker, but I'll do my best. Fellow citizens, first, as a matter of great urgency, if you find yourself still within the confines of City 17, you are well advised to leave the city at once by the fastest means available to you. We have restored service to much of the commuter transport system in order to carry citizens out of the city as quickly as possible. We have also established camps and triage areas in the surrounding environs. I repeat, you must evacuate the city at once. While there was certainly a great benefit in destroying the Citadel's teleport core, we have detected one rather unfortunate side effect. It would appear an inevitability that very soon now the Citadel will be consumed in a destructive event whose magnitude I cannot currently estimate with any certainty, except to say that it will almost certainly irradiate an area of many miles radius. Therefore, I repeat, evacuate City 17 at once, if not sooner. I cannot state this without enough undue emphasis. On a lighter note, if you are already in one of our designated safe zones, I feel obliged to point out that a more fortunate side effect of the reactor's destruction is the complete removal of the Combine's reproductive suppression field. For those so inclined, now would be an excellent time for procreation, which is to say, in layman's terms, you should give serious consideration to doing your part for the revival of the species. Thus, for the time being, I believe that all Combine portals have failed completely, as well as all communications systems based on that technology. In short, the Combine are completely cut off. Combine forces currently stationed on Earth are now isolated units, stranded. However, this is most likely a temporary state of affairs. As we once learned to our dismay, even the relatively tiny fracture at Black Mesa gave our enemies an opening which they were able to force ever wider as they poured through in greater and greater numbers. We continue to diligently assemble and train a new generation of scientists and technicians. For what the Combine fear the most is not any tangible human weapon, but our will, our intellect, our ability to respond selectively and rationally to every terror they turn against us. And, oh yes, if you missed any part of this message, it will loop repeatedly until there is no point in looping it any longer. I apologize for any inadvertent errors or omissions. As you can imagine, we have had scarcely time to record, let alone rehearse. What's that, Eli? Oh, right. This has been Dr. Isaac Kleiner, formerly of Black Mesa, now simply a citizen, like all of you. Now, where did I put that calculator?
Well, I just could not live beside them. I don't feel that they should be oppressed. But I moved here, one of the main reasons was because it was a white community. And that's the only place I intend to live. If I have to leave Levittown, I will do so.
The colour problem is undoubtedly a very serious matter.
But I do think it's time they stop them coming into the country, because in time we shall be glad to immigrate to get out to meet white people.
You go and visit white enclaves all around the country, and you bring statistics to attention that there's been a huge amount of white flight.
Startling things I've come upon, this country is as segregated residentially and educationally as it was in 1970.
Everybody's white, and we don't have any problems.
Warren County in general has such low crime. Lots of people don't even lock their doors, even in today's day and age.
As people of color, especially immigrants, live increasingly in suburbs and cities, white people are living in towns and exurban areas that are predominantly, even extremely white.
Half of the kids in this country under 5 years old are minorities. By far the greatest number are Hispanic. Know what that means? 25 years and the majority population is Hispanic. Do your duty. Make more babies.
What is happening now to white men right now is exactly what was done to black folk, is exactly what was done to...
You understand what the New York Times wants? They want to break down the white Christian male power structure, of which you're a part, and so am I. And they want to bring in millions of foreign nationals to basically break down the structure that we have.
So if you were to look, I mean, is there a problem? And as far as these people in their white-topias, do they consider there's a problem? They don't need policing. They've kept the problem outside their doors.
In fact, many people aren't aware of it. They move to these communities with nary a thought of how segregated it is. And implicitly, they just assume the qualities that attracted them, friendliness, comfort, security, are whiteness in and of itself.
I knew everywhere.
These views may appear extreme, but they're not as unrepresentative as you might think. Dispatches has commissioned a major survey of opinion about immigration into Britain. Between January 17th and the 21st, YouGov polled over 1,000 people, not just the white majority, but also first, second and third generation immigrants and the newly arrived. The survey revealed that 83% of all Britons consider we're currently facing an immigration crisis. 84% think the government should reduce immigration or stop it completely. Matter not alone. Our survey showed that 66% of Britons feel that their jobs are being undercut by migrant workers. 69% feel that they are losing out because migrants are being given special treatment. And at 74%, the figure is highest amongst the working class.
To a certain extent. Because at school, there are groups of black people, groups of white people, and it's sort of like still separate, even though everybody's friends with each other, then there's a lot of activities that everybody does separately.
Absolutely. It always will. You can look around and see. You can tell.
And I come from a state where we're about 99% white race, so I don't see a lot of it. Personally, no. I'm from New Hampshire.
I'm not sure why, but I mean, people are racist.
And they do not talk to us, even though we would approach them, you know, and they have different mannerisms, different everything.
Sense to where you're in an area, they with us with them, where you're a little nervous because of reasons.
Especially here in Atlanta because of the multicultural differences. Even going to church sometimes, people do tend to look in my direction like, hey, you don't really fit in here.
Everybody knows it.
I think a lot of people try to turn a blind eye to it because it seems like, kind of like going to the doctor, you kind of hope it'll just go away, but it never will.
The conflicts aren't, as you might expect, the result of tensions between a native white culture and an immigrant one. Instead, what we're witnessing are fights between immigrant groups who belong to cultures imported from abroad. I'm in the very center of Leicester, which is expected to become the first majority non-white city in the UK. But in Leicester, non-white does not mean that one ethnic community dominates. Outside the multi-ethnic city centre, I discovered a Leicester which comprised separate communities, each of them living separate lives. Just a few miles north is the St Matthew's estate. The Somalis, Leicester's most recent wave of immigrants, have made this neighbourhood their own. Next to it is Belgrave, with its sari shops and vegetarian curry houses. This vibrant area has been home to the Hindu community since the 1960s. And then there's Highfields, a distinctly Muslim area with a mosque on practically every corner.